Grand Cathay, a faction known for their artillery box, but today we'll be rushing with this defensive faction. They don't have the greatest melee infantry, but this is where the spell support comes in. With the Mastery of Elemental Winds, you can actually boost the spell debuffs and buffs to a massive degree. With 145% of spell intensity right now, for example, the Jade Shield can protect with 64% of damage resistance. Other debuffs are also more potent, for example, the Transmutation of Lead can strip away more attack and weapon damage. And same goes for the Curse of Midnight Winds on the Astromancer, with 3 single entities as the spellcasting characters and then also a Wuxing War Compass. We have 4 single entities on the field, which is the maximum number you can take according to most tournament rules. For the rest of the army, we have a front line of Jade Warriors backed up by a bunch of Peasant Long Spears. They are rather defensive in nature, but the debuffs will be helping them out in melee combat. While in the middle, we have a couple Crane Gunners trying to counter-shoot the Chaos Dwarfs. And further back, we have a bunch of Peasant Horsemen, 3 of them in fact, backed up by 2 sturdier Jade Lancers. And that's it for the Grand Cathay army build. Now let's go and check out our opponent, the Chaos Dwarfs. A rather narrow build here, going super elite. 2 Chaos Dwarf Warriors, 1 with great weapons, 1 without, and then in the front line, 3 Infernal Guards, 1 of them the Iron Swan that has that explosive charges. They will be supported by 4 artillery units in total, 2 of them the Death Shrieker rocket launcher, 1 of them the magma cannon, and a single Dreadquake mortar. This is a very sizable artillery force and possibly able to outshoot Cathay. But unfortunately for them here, I'm not going to stand and shoot against them. I'll be rushing instead. The leadership of the Chaos Dwarf would be Drazwav the Ashen coming in with some damaging spells, including Burning Wrath and also the Hell Hammer. And that's it for the army builds. Now let's get the battle started. My opponent here having 4 single entity artillery with such reckless hatred and firepower. My artillery, the 2 Crane Gunner crews, pretty much can't outshoot them, with only 275 range, with the single entity artillery having at least 380, the rest all over 400. Yep, the Crane Gunners are at the mercy of the Chaos Dwarf artillery, as they're raining death upon my formations. So all I can do is pretty much just rush my infantry forward as fast as possible while the cavalry will move into a flanking position. The multi-shots and the magma cannon shots are obliterating some of my Crane Gunners. One of the Jade Warriors are already on half health. Thankfully, the Dreadquake mortar doesn't have the greatest accuracy, so they're not landing too many substantial hits, but the Death Shrieker rocket launchers with their multi-shots, knocking out half of the HP on this one single Crane Gunner unit in one volley. The other Crane Gun got targeted by multiple Chaos Dwarf artillery, probably gonna be dead soon. Anyways, let's do some fast forward here as the Crane Gunners are trying to counterfire but with little effect. They do not have enough burst damage to shoot down single entities, as their damage mostly comes from penetrating enemy ranks and hitting multiple models. And with single entities, all you can hit is a single model, so no multiplied damage for you. Anyways, I will get some Jade Lancers getting onto my opponent's exposed backlines, successfully tying down the majority of my opponent's firepower. And especially this magma cannon getting shot by some of the Crane Gunners, possibly taking quite a bit of damage on the charge. Now luring the Infernal Gods into countering my Jade Lancers, I'll be dropping in one of the Comet of Kazandora from the Wuxing War Compass. With the damage amplification from the spell intensity, this was able to do some maximum damage on the Infernal Gods, knocking away half of their health. And to make my Jade Lancers a little bit tankier, I'll be dropping in that Jade Shield upgraded version for even more damage resistance. And then of course from the spell intensity from the Mastery of Elemental Winds. Now they have 64% of damage resistance, shielding themselves from over half of the incoming damage. Especially when the damage from the Infernal Gods, the Death Shrieker rocket launchers, none of them have that much armor piercing. So the Jade Lancers are holding their line valiantly while I was able to drop a Dragon Breath spell to chip away some health of the Infernal Gods. Unfortunately, my opponent did countered with their own spell, a Hell Hammer, blasting away the majority of health on these Jade Warriors. They are trying to move into combat, but they are facing the most elite infantry of the Chaos Dwarf roster, the Iron Swans. Then again, I do have my debuff stacking. With double attack debuffs, originally they reduce enemy debuff by 24 per spell, but because I have 4 units with Mastery of Elemental Winds boosting that spell intensity, the spells now reduces melee attack by 34 each. The Infernal Iron Sworn, originally having 50 melee attack, now down to 0, having minimal hit chance even against the Peasant Long Spears who does not have any harmony buffing them. So they are not doing any damage, while my Peasant Long Spears and Jade Warriors will do a little bit more poke damage against the Chaos Dwarf Warriors and the Iron Swans who have their armor debuffed by -43. Also, base weapon damage from the units here are all debuffed by a whopping -44%. So the damage against my Peasant Long Spears and Jade Warriors are further reduced. Unfortunately though, that's not enough to save the Jade Warriors who got hit by the Hellhammer earlier. Some of the Peasant Horses are being routed as well. Still, the Jade Lancers at the back receive another boosted Jade Shield, while the Peasant Long Spears in the front are holding as well, buying me more time for some hammer and anvil action from the Jade Lancers here, slamming into the backs of the Infernal Gods, doing some nice impact damage, but unfortunately, some Jade Warriors push is lagging right now. So a volley of the Deathshrieker rocket, one of them not getting tied down by my units and was defended by the Chaos Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, managed to fire away and bombard my infantry lines. Another combat of Kazandora here, but probably did more friendly fire damage than to the Infernal Iron Swan. I really hate that the comment of Kazandora actually tilts the trajectory randomly, making the spell unreliable with a high chance of friendly fire. But either ways, some damage to the Infernal Iron Swan, this super elite unit is always good, and my opponent probably forgot to turn on fire at will, was not able to use the explosions on these deadly heavy units. While at the back here, the Deathshrieker rocket is still firing, blasting away some of my Jade Warriors, but I'll also be returning the favor with the Bound Lightning spell. It doesn't have the largest area of effect, but when it strikes, it really hurts, especially with the spell intensity boost. While the single entity artillery are all routed off by my persistent effort of Jade Lancers. These guys have been holding everything in place for so long and doing so much damage, 1,800 value, all from hitting up all these expensive artillery pieces. The Jade Shields really coming in clutch, keeping the Jade Lancers in the fight this whole time. Although eventually they are worked down by the armor-piercing attacks of the Chaos Dwarf Warriors and Drasolov's melee attack, but either ways, with the artillery offline, finally my crane gunners are able to return and start firing at the expensive Iron Swans, doing some pretty nice damage, but then there's still this one unit of Deathshrieker rocket launcher firing, so these guys are routed off by probably a single volley, while I'll be sending even more mobility here just to make sure these Deathshrieker rockets, the Dreadquake Mortar, and where's the Magma Cannon? Over here, are surely routed. Unfortunately for me though, the Wuxing War Compass is slowly grind down by the Infernal Iron Swan, though at this point, I probably have used up all my spells. Yeah, both the Celestial Lightning and the Celestial Comet from the bound abilities are all used up. So the Wuxing War Compass has probably outlived his purpose. Still, the Mastery of Elemental Winds, the spell intensity boost can be useful, losing it would still be a bummer. At this point, balance of power is that even, perhaps ever so slightly in the Chaos Dwarf's favor, with Drasolov being rather healthy. And there's still a lot of elite infantry on the field. Chaos Dwarf Warrior still almost full health. This warrior is also on half health. Infernal Gods standing by. And Infernal Iron Swan still fighting with a lot of their blasting charges. But then again, we have another double debuff incoming, reducing these Chaos Dwarf Warriors' attack down to 0 once again, and also debuffing their weapon stats. With the additional hit to their weapon strength, with Infernal Gods only having 15 weapon strength, every single Chaos Dwarf unit covered by these area of effect spells are hitting like absolute wet noodle. Drasolov the Ashen originally having around 50 melee attack, I think, but now only down to 0, so everything here for the Chaos Dwarfs are not doing any effective damage against stuff that has 25 melee defense, and they're definitely not doing much damage to the single entities either. On top of that, Curse of the Midnight Winds has an armor debuff, further reducing the Chaos Dwarf's armor by 40 something, and the Dragon Breath was able to do some noticeable damage against these heavy Chaos Dwarf infantry, and then Cathay is swarming this position with sheer numbers. Even the Infernal Gods are routed by the overwhelming force of Cathay peasants and single entities, especially with the Jade Lancers charging into their rear. At the back there, Wuxing War Compass almost being worked down, while the Crane Gunners, one of them actually managed to regroup, now chipping away the health of the Infernal Iron Swans. And yeah, at this point, the Chaos Dwarf are in a massive disadvantage. There's nothing much they can do. Finally, the first volley of explosives going onto the Wuxing War Compass, but then it just slams straight into melee combat, stopping it from firing. And yeah, it will be going down, but either ways, it has regained a lot of value here, 1,100 worth of gold value. While the single entities here are just psycho-charging Draswolf to death, my opponent here not bringing any mobility means that he will not be able to secure any of their routing units. All these Chaos Dwarf warriors, the single entity artillery, can easily get routed off by my overwhelming force of artillery. There are some Chaos Dwarf warriors there holding back some of my peasant horses, dragging them down, but alas, that probably would not be enough, as the last of the Iron Swans are being picked apart by the crane gunners from afar. And then we have Draswolf here on foot being gooned to death by multiple characters. Sure, he's not taking too much damage from one character, but when there are multiple characters fighting him, then he will start taking damage from behind, from the rear, where he has less melee defense. Anyways, there's also the dragon-blooded Shogun Lord Psycho charging as well, chipping away a nice chunk of his health every time he dives in. And yeah, let's just fast forward here as the Psycho Charge continues here with the Jade Lancers doing some more damage, chasing down the Infernal Iron Sworn. Draswolf being slowly but surely overwhelmed by my single entities and peasant spears. A Hellhammer was attempted here, but then again Draswolf got knocked around, forcefully cancelling his spellcast while the Shogun Lord dives in with a Jade Shield. One final debuff of Curse of Midnight Winds, and that's all it needs to trigger army losses. Now this spell intensity plus melee attack debuff stacking can be quite a bit of overkill because there are only very few units with 60 attack or more. However, when an elite single entity got targeted by these debuffs, hilarity ensues. Take Malus Darkblade for example, who now has 75 melee attack all thanks to that murderous prowess, giving him 25% extra melee attack. Normally he would have boosted damage, but unfortunately we are counteracting with a Curse of the Midnight Winds, followed up by a Transmutation of Lead. Now the Dark Elf Edgelord's stats got debuffed all the way to Oblivion. He is struggling to hit even the most basic of peasants. This gives my characters a lot more safety in fighting Malus Darkblade, as they have to worry much less about counter attacks. On top of that, the Curse of Midnight Winds armor debuff allows all my units to do a bit more damage to the Dark Lord. And then you can also see the Astromancer just not taking much damage from Malus at all. Now this build's core idea is built around the spell intensity, and it can also benefit other spells outside of attack debuffs. Take the Yang Shogun Lord for example, the Dragon's Breath spell and Jade Shield all got boosted in terms of effectiveness. And then over here we have the Might of Heaven and Earth, providing some significant attack buffs in terms of damage and attack stats. Combined with the magic attacks, the Jade Lancers rolled straight over the Sirens, right onto the next zombie unit. Some other buffs and debuffs that come to mind are Plague of Rust, which further strips away armor without risking miscast damage or spending more winds of magic, or we have Harmonic Convergence, which can turn a chaff unit into an absolute elite. Really, there are a lot of possibilities for the debuffs and buff stacking for players to explore. Unfortunately, this build is still not that competitive because Cathay right now as a whole is still very weak at rushing. Against a more narrow army, this build can win with the numbers advantage and the spell support. If they're fighting against a very wide formation or their opponent just decides to go full on melee rush, then this Cathay army with their lackluster cavalry and their infantry, which are mainly defensive troops, simply can't beat back their opponents without enough missile support. However, the reason why I'm trying out this build is that I'm waiting for the DLC to come out and perhaps adding more melee units to the Cathay roster. Maybe they'll be adding the Monkey Warriors, and then suddenly Cathay Melee Rush is viable, and so is the build. Can't say anything for sure yet, but we shall see. Now to quickly wrap up the video, let's have a look at the army performances of the first showcased battle. The Crane Gunners, one of them returned from routing and did some good damage, the other did not. While the MVP of this game is not the missiles for sure, but one of the Jade Lancers, 1,800 gold worth of damage value, shutting down multiple single entity artillery from the Chaos Dwarfs. The Jade Shield really kept them long enough in the fight to dish out the pain, grind down those artillery. While the other Jade Lancers did some good psycho charging as well, got a lot of kills, recovering their own value as well. The Jade Warriors though did not do much damage as they were acting more like an anvil. Same goes for the Peasant Long Spears, allowing the psycho charge of the Peasant Horses and the Jade Lancers to dish out maximum pain, especially with the debuff spell stacking up, helping them to tank a little longer with the reduced attack from the Chaos Dwarf Infantry. Shogun Lord did some good damage with the blast from the Dragon's Breath and also psycho charging Draswolf, and of course the Wuxing War Compass with the spell intensity buffed up by the elemental winds. It actually generated a lot of value. Not quite so for the Alchemist and Astromancer, as they're not exactly combat characters. Chaos Dwarfs though, The single entity artillery did a lot of damage as usual there, but unfortunately with the Jade shields on the Jade Lancers, they were not able to beat back the cavalry fast enough with the help of the Infernal Gods. So the Infernal Gods, with all those attack debuffs, didn't exactly get the greatest trade against my Cathay infantry and the Infernal Iron Swan as well, only barely earning back their value, I think. Unfortunately, did not use up most of their explosive charges, so that was definitely a mistake on the Chaos Dwarf's part. The Chaos Dwarf warriors didn't got any good trades overall, while Drazoav the Ashen did some good damage with the Hellhammer, but that's about it. With all the debuffs, I most likely would not have won against the Chaos Dwarfs due to how elite their infantry are, but the debuff stacking really coming in handy today, preventing the Dawizar from trading well against my Cathay infantry who does not have Harmony buffing them. Anyways, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoy it, and if you want to see more Total War Warhammer content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and receive notifications with new video uploads. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.